All right, welcome guys to the very first episode of the Startup Pursuit. I'm joined with a very special guest, Luki, who is a founder of Focus Inspired. He's a speaker and he's talked at many post-secondary institutions. He is a mentor at the Hub, and he's also a career catalyst. And honestly, the list just goes on and on and on. So without further ado, please, Luki, if you can tell the audience more about what you do and yeah.
Sure. So thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be your first guest, and hopefully things go well because we all know how technology and all these things when you record for the first time. So Luki Danukarjanto, Luki's fine. I came from Indonesia. I was born there, but moved to Toronto when I was young. Ended up doing a degree in computer science because it seemed like the thing to do. At that time, the dot-com bubble was growing. So it's kind of like today where everybody wanted to learn to code. Everybody was all about Silicon Valley, this and that. But when I graduated, the dot-com bubble burst, right? So I was fortunate to go to this school and I had co-op, right? So that gave me a little bit of an edge compared to some of the other contemporaries who didn't have that work experience. And when I graduated, it was tough to get a job, but I still had a few hits here and there. And what really helped me was a friend whose brother was working at a company, and he helped me get an interview, and I got a job, right? And I had a couple of offers, and it was probably the most interesting one out there. It was for a company called Deloitte. They're one of the big four accounting firms, but they were in the tech consulting side. But kind of naive me, I had no idea because I wanted to work for like IBM and Microsoft, and those are the big tech companies. I had no idea what this Deloitte thing was, but it turned out to be an amazing opportunity. So I started coding, and then I grew up, and a few months in, I realized I don't particularly like coding. And it's tough when you spend 4 years training for a career. And I thought I didn't like it because it was school, because nobody really likes school. But it turns out I didn't particularly like coding. Now, I didn't hate it, but I didn't particularly like it. So there's a team on the other side having a great time. So I connected with them. What do they do? And they kind of told me, and they kind of took me under their wing and started learning the business side. So I spent over 12 years there, and I basically did everything from a project perspective, did coding, testing, change management, training, project management, advisory. And by the end of it, I was running a 25-person practice area, something like that. And why a lot of folks want to speak to me is I used to run their undergrad campus recruiting program. So I used to have the list literally that said yes or no to all the students that got hired across Canada. So I know a few things about resumes, interviews, and networking, and from experience. And on the experience hire side, I was part of the lead team that hired, our group hired about 200 experienced folks every year, right? At least that was our targets. And yeah, it was a great experience there. And then I had what I call my quarter career crisis, which is basically I traveled a lot as a consultant. I was on a plane Monday morning, usually a 6 a.m. flight, which means I had to wake up at 4 to get to the airport on time, that sort of thing. Back on Thursday evening, if I was lucky, otherwise back on Friday. And I was FaceTiming with my wife, and my son was learning to walk and talk and roll, and basically growing up over the screen, right? And then a second one was on the way. So I had a choice to make because I could become a partner. So I was being groomed to be partner, which is kind of a C-level executive up there, or family, because I didn't think that I could do both and do justice to both of them at the same time. So family won, and I ended up doing a lot of soul searching, self-reflecting, talking to mentors. And what I found is that I loved coaching, connecting with folks. When I was doing a multi-million dollar business transformation, it was kind of like, meh, been there, done that. But when it was a new hire, they came in and, hey, Luki, can you grab coffee to tell me how to be more successful in my career? I got excited because, oh yeah, you can do this. So fast forward to kind of today, I leverage a lot of my network and connections at the post-secondary institute because I used to hire from a lot of them and build a relationship. And the goal is to elevate education, right? So a lot of things that I do is to teach soft skills. I wrote a book. It's called Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, which basically sums me up. I have a goal to weave mentorship into the fabric of society, starting by making Toronto the mentorship capital of the world. And what that means is that everyone, you guys included, should have 5, 10 mentors, or as many as you can handle. But more importantly, each of you should have 5, 10 mentees, and sharing all the abundance and wisdom that you've had down to all the up and comers. Because there's a first year, there's a grade 10 that's wants to be exactly like you in a couple of years. And if they had a benefit of kind of, oh, this is why I did to be successful, well, then it'd be an end to conflict and war in the world and stuff. Well, at least that's my utopian vision. And one of the aims is to become one of the new billionaires, which is to positively impact 1 billion people, right? And the joke at the end is to ask each one for $1, because it's not all philanthropic. But yeah, so that sums me up in kind of the background. Well, what I'm doing today is, as you mentioned, I'm helping mentor folks like yourselves at the Hub. I'm doing a little bit of youth entrepreneurship, startup mentorship. So any sort of mentoring programs, I'm usually there. Newcomers, youth, schools, all of that. What I want to do is basically complement the current education system. So they teach you the hard skills. I want to teach you the soft skills and kind of bring it together. So stuff like emotional intelligence, empathy, how to network, because everyone says you need to network, but you arrange an appointment and have a coffee with someone, you're like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. So going through the motions and figuring, okay, this is how you do it. Again, stuff I wish I knew earlier. And things like time management, learning to learn, things like memory, right? I've found over the years that I don't have a bad memory. I just have an untrained memory. So one of the names that I give myself is a DJ for personal development. In that, most of the stuff, if not all the stuff I say, none of it's new. I just take the great wisdom of a whole bunch of people that are out there and kind of remix it in a way that kind of resonates with you. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And there's probably more to do. I'm building an app myself, which will be kind of an automated version of you. It's called Career Buddy, which is kind of a Luki in your pocket type of thing to provide that guidance and wisdom just in time. At least that's the vision. So have a version that's out on the App Store and Google Play, but don't download it now. It's not in a great shape. Hopefully in the next few months we'll get in a place where it's actually something that I'm proud to share, and then it'll grow and grow and grow and grow. Yeah, and it'll be hopefully my legacy.
So what got you started in entrepreneurship?
So I think I always had some entrepreneurial tendencies when I was young. I actually always wanted to open up my own restaurant. I wanted to open up a tutoring school for whatever reason, because I thought I was good at teaching people. And there were sometimes the dumbest memory that I can have is when I was growing up, there was this thing called GIMP, which is basically like plastic threads that you can kind of weave. It's a pretty girly thing, but you can weave it into like bracelets and necklaces and stuff. And I was always good with my hands. I was great at like origami and stuff, and I was good at making those things. So I thought I could turn that into a business, right? So I actually took a pad of Post-it notes and I created like an order sheet, right? So I actually drew on every single Post-it, like how many quantity and whatever and how much it would be. And I created that. And I was in the schoolyard saying, hey, does anybody want me to make any of them? And like, sure, of course. And it's like, well, it's going to be whatever, $1, $5 per. And they're like, not that much, right? So I was always interested in doing that sort of stuff, but never really capitalized on it because I guess I wasn't as good on the sales side. So, but I got into kind of the normal traditional path where I got a job and went into corporate and all that sort of stuff. And it took a while for me to actually come to grips that, you know what, I could do something on my own. Because a lot of folks, when you're in that world, you have that safety net, you have a reoccurring income and salary. And it's different than, okay, you got to go out and fend for yourself, right? Be your own boss, but you kind of eat what you kill, right? And if you don't kill anything, then you go hungry for a while. So I essentially transitioned because I ended up doing a contract for a bank. And banks tend to have the stigma of being a little more regular, like 9 to 4:30 type of thing. So I was pretty set in that. And then it gave me kind of 4:30 to 6 to do my own stuff and then spend time with the kids. And then from like 9 to 12 gave me a couple more hours to do some work. So that kind of allowed me to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? Is it coaching? Is it one-on-one? Is it whatever, getting clients, having coffees, all that sort of stuff. It was one where it was almost out of necessity, figuring out I wanted to help people. So the only way that I could figure out to do it is to do it on my own. because I was considering, well, maybe I should get a job at the University Career Center. But I don't know if that would have been the right thing, because part of the challenge is that the career centers have limited capabilities and capacity, right? So I think the statistic is that they serve maybe 10-20% of the student population, right? So what if the other 80-90% decide, oh, I want your help? Well, they just would get overwhelmed, right? So they're not necessarily set up for success to help the students, right? So so I figured, you know what, I can do it differently. I could do it better. I could do it on my own, right? But the challenge is that my demographic was kind of you guys, the young professionals before you go out to university. But you don't have money, right? Because you already have university college debt, whatever it is. You kind of live on budgetary means. So to pay for someone like myself isn't possible and feasible. So figuring out how to monetize, I moved towards kind of young professionals anyway, because my demographic that I serve is tends to be those that graduated and have been in the workforce for a couple of years. You did a degree in accounting, got a job in accounting, and realized I don't like accounting, or I did what I wanted to do in accounting, and what else is there, right? So what if that person, instead of continuing on their path for the next 30-40 years, got to actually do something that they wanted to do, right? And for a lot of people, entrepreneurship is that path, right? Because nobody's doing it right now, and it's kind of the hot buzzword. Everybody is a founder or co-founder of this and that. So let's all hop on the bandwagon and do that. But the challenge is it's hard, right? So I kind of learned the hard way of how difficult it actually is. Because when you have a boss and someone to report you have a bit of that external motivation. When it's all on you, well, sometimes I don't want to have to cold call people or cold email someone or do this, then that, but I know it's going to be good for the business. So having the motivation and drive to do all that can be challenging at times. So I don't know if that answers your question of how I got into entrepreneurship, but it's kind of a whole bunch of topics related to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, the main topic for this podcast really was like, you have an idea, but then how do you get started, right?
Mm.
So do you have any like tips or tricks to let the people who want to be entrepreneurs, like do you have any tips and tricks for them for how they can get started? So they have an idea, but
Sure.
they want to.
Yeah, so I want to caveat that with, I'm by no means an expert, right? I don't have tons of research underneath me. This is one person's opinion. So the way that I ended up doing is I had a full-time job from 9 to 5 that basically paid the bills and actually paid a little bit more so I could save up. I call that time when I was on contract kind of having my own seed money, because I got paid pretty well as that, and I would bank a lot. I don't normally buy a lot of stuff anyway. So I would try to bank as much as I can so that if I did have a rough spot, I would have savings to go after, right? So and essentially I did what I mentioned. So 4:30, the bank kind of shut down and people were leaving, but I would stay until 4:30 to 6, right? And I stayed because if I went home, there's all the kids in the family that would kind of be distractions. And then I would get home, I would do dinner, how was your day, to the wife and all that sort of stuff. Put the kids to bed because I wanted to be a good dad, because the whole point of me doing this was to give me some freedom and flexibility. But after chatting a bit with my wife, then spending kind of 9 to 12, continuing to work on the idea. So a lot of it is taking your idea and saying, well, what is the grand vision, right? And at least having some sort of direction. Are you actually doing a product? Are you doing a service? Do you need an app? Do you need whatever it is? And once you at least have a starting point, because your idea can evolve, then what is the first step to get to that point, right? So if you are a technical person and you want to code an app, well, you should probably learn whatever coding language it is, Node.js, React Native, whatever it is, and go download all the software and start figuring out, well, how do I create my first app? And then figuring out, okay, how do I design my first app? And then you realize you're a crappy designer and you can't actually draw for anything, or it looks super ugly. Well, then you have to look for other resources. So find a friend. If you're in school, it's great because you have access to basically the whole campus community, right? Oftentimes, if you don't know someone, someone knows someone. So you'll have coffee, you'll go in class, you'll have lunch with people and say, well, who do you know is kind of the most creative artists that you know, right? And then connect with them and try to sell them on your idea, right? And pitch it to them, basically. So start with kind of what you might eventually incorporate into an investor pitch deck, but start with convincing that person to kind of join the team. And if you can do that, then you have someone to design for you, and you fill in the gaps that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. But if you can't convince them, well, you probably need to work on it, right? Because at some point you'll need to convince more and more people. And if that person is part of your target demographic and you can't convince them, then your idea needs work, right? And ask them, well, why wouldn't you? What isn't appealing about it? And see if you can weave that into what you're trying to do and cultivate. So, and then every day try to do one small thing, one medium-sized thing, or a bigger thing that moves you towards that goal, right? So a lot of folks have ideas, and unfortunately ideas are a dime a dozen, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of thought of it before you. Hey, I come up with that idea. It's like, well, why didn't you do anything about it?
Yeah.
It's that action that really turns into something. So if you're trying to build a technical idea, well, either you need to learn to code or you need to find a technical co-founder. Now, because everybody is building apps or whatever, it's hard to find technical co-founders nowadays. So I found just going out and expanding what your definition of a tech co-founder might be would be interesting. I actually found some interesting folks that are at the high school level, right? These are like kind of the hackers that, well, they haven't been kind of jaded by the corporate world and all that. They actually want to make a difference, right? And I haven't pulled the trigger on any of them as of yet, but basically they show a lot of promise in the sense that they are wanting to do it because they want to do it, not because they see an exit at the end. They want to be a famous Mark Zuckerberg type of thing. They actually say, you know what, that's a great idea, and I'd love to see it come to fruition. So yeah, get started basically by taking action, doing something towards that goal, figuring out, okay, where are your gaps? And if you can't do it, either learn it, because YouTube has pretty much everything. There's online courses on pretty much anything. You have to invest your time. And if you don't want to do that, well then bring people on board. But keep in mind that as you bring more people on board, the pie gets smaller, right? Because you want to share, you want to be fair and equitable to other people. So if it's a co-founder, what is it, 50-50, right? 60-40, 75-25, whatever the number is. But keep in mind, if you two have kind of a complete skill set, that's great. You might need to bring on a third, a fourth, and you have to be careful when there's kind of too many cooks in the kitchen too, and figure, okay, what do we want to get out of this? Especially if they're friends too, because a lot of the resources that I've kind of consumed and read is that a lot of the challenges or why startups fail is usually due to co-founder conflicts, right? There's multiple people and they had different visions, or the visions changed, and then they couldn't come to an agreement, and therefore they had to disperse. Not necessarily because of the product or whatever, but because the relationship was not solid, then they had to change. So to answer your question, take action.
Awesome. No, that was great. As you were speaking, I had so many questions, but then along the way you answered them all.
Okay.
That was awesome. Yeah. But to just go more into the whole finding a co-founder, do you think it's important that the co-founder you look for shares the same passion as you? So let's say they have the skill sets needed and they're great at what they do, but they don't necessarily have the same passion as you do. Is it okay to still bring them on as a co-founder, or do they need to have that passion?
My opinion is that you want some version of that passion, right? Not necessarily exactly aligned. There's certain values and value systems that you want to have that are aligned, right? So if you guys are building a fitness app, right? If the person that you bring on board just eats McDonald's and doesn't take care of their body and whatever, it's probably not going to go well, right? But if they're health conscious as well, now they don't have to be as passionate, as fanatical as you, but they at least say, you know what, I will and totally understand why this is relevant. But their passion really lies in the tech. Their passion really lies in sales. Their passion really lies in whatever. So as long as there are commonalities in that, they don't have to be like 100% aligned. But you want to have a good cross section, because when people are doing things for different reasons, then that's when challenges can happen. And oftentimes being upfront about it and even having those early conversations. So what if this thing blows up and we do really well? Like, what are we going to do? Are we going to keep it? Are we going to sell it? Are we going to whatever? If we sell it, do we all stay on? Do we do whatever? Those sorts of little things that, of course, right now, like 50% of zero is still zero. But if things actually go well, try to have those conversations as early as possible and continue to have them, because things change. Because before, when it was just an idea, it's like, yeah, this is not going to happen. So it's more of a bet. But now you actually have maybe some money coming in, a bunch of active users, potential investors. Like, oh, okay, how does that change? Because now it's actually they're thinking it's real, right? So ideally, if you can find someone with that passion, but at the end of the day, you may never find that perfect fit, right? So it's always a balance between, well, do I get started? Or do I have to find this kind of mythical, kind of unicorn person that is my most passionate founder? You might be able to find that person, or it might be better to at least get started. Because the other part is you often don't know until you start working with that person, right? You met them at a hackathon, you met them at some sort of networking event, and you had a great conversation, and you've been having great coffees and chatting over whatever instant messaging you use right now. And it's been good, but until you actually start doing things, you won't really know. And then as you go into the relationship, you need to communicate and say, okay, hey, this is what we talked about. Are we still aligned? What about this and that? Are we still on the same road? So yeah, if you can find someone just as passionate, then definitely do that.
I think a lot of people have the problem that they don't know if they can trust them, or like if that person's going to put in just as much work and care about their company just as much as them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on that? How do you know that or prevent like hiring someone who doesn't care?
Well, I don't know if you can ever know that completely, right?
Yeah.
So again, you just had one conversation, one coffee with them. So probably do a few test cases to say, okay, you know what? Let's start up. We're not going to draft up a partnership agreement or whatever, or you could if you're at that point, and just say, you know what? But first part is we need to do these things in order to get it done. So if you're hiring if you're a business guy and hiring a tech co-founder, you probably say, okay, if you can kind of build this out, then we'll in kind of entrepreneurial parlance is like vest you in for a certain amount, right? And kind of test them out. If they're amicable to that, because not everyone will want that relationship, but you have to feel the trust out for each other, because in order to get trust, you often have to give trust first, right? So you need to trust, okay, I trust that they're going to do this, right? And if they don't do it, okay, well, now you have a data point, right? And that means there are all sorts of reasons why they might not have been able to do it, and you might want to adjust appropriately. But if it's continually, oh, they haven't done it again and again and again and again, well, you see all the warning signs, right? Yeah. So it's really up to you to decide, hey, this is not working out, right? And it may not be that you meet someone for the first time and you get married right away. You might want to date a little bit, go steady, that sort of thing. It's like any sort of human relationship, right? And then once you find, you know what, then you can put a ring on it, that sort of thing, right? But yeah, it kind of relates to kind of the dating analogies as well. So just I would start by trusting first, but you want to be a bit cautious, like have some cautious trust in there too. Like, don't give all your bank information, your passwords and everything to them right away. But as they kind of earn your trust, I tend to give people trust, probably more than I need to, and then take it away when I realize that they're just not into it. Because they often feel that trust. It's like, oh wow, he's letting me do all this, and that helps with the relationship. But then I'll try to have those frank conversations. Hey, you said that we were supposed to do this, and it hasn't been done. What's happening, right? And then figuring out how to progress from there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, I had a few questions about once you find your team and you guys are ready to go. What do you think the next steps are? Do you think it's going with building the MVP? Do you think it's doing more market research? Do you think it's more surveying? What do you think the next steps are once you finally have that team in place?
I'm a fan of action, because you want to do a little bit of research to make sure that there's at least some sort of viability in that, but all the research in the world won't necessarily reflect the market. So
Yeah.
building something that says, you know what, this is gonna work, um, or at least this has some promise to work is an opportunity. So, but a lot of times it doesn't have to be like a full-fledged out tech platform. There was a company that or an idea that someone had to rent out camping equipment, right? They wanted to do kind of the Airbnb for camping equipment, because like how often do you use camping equipment? Once, twice a year, right? And oftentimes it's just sitting there. So if someone else can borrow it, why not rent it? It's a couple $100 there, and exchange it. So they wanted to build out this whole tech MVP, basically the Airbnb. This is how you rent. This is inventory. This is whatever. Well, it could start off as simply as saying, hey, do you know someone who has camping equipment? Yes. Do you know someone who wants camping equipment? Yes. Could you somehow initiate a conversation through email, through phone, through a meetup, through whatever, to kind of agree to terms on exchanging that, or renting, borrowing that camping equipment? Yes. And then can you figure out how to monetize that? And it doesn't have to be any tech involved. The only tech might be email. Just exchange, hey, I met this guy Tony. He wants to borrow your camping equipment. He's willing to pay whatever, $10, $50 for it, whatever. Then starting with that kind of low budget, low tech transaction, and then what you can do is understand, okay, why did that transaction work, and what would add value in that transaction? Is it being able to find that? Is it the quality portion, because I found this tent but it had holes and it was ripped, it was dirty, it was whatever. So there's a bit of QA in there. Okay, that's the value add that we can have in the process, not just the connecting, the whatever, because at some point someone else has that idea, someone else could build that. So you want to figure out, okay, how can we do it differently? How can we somehow capture the market, create your secret sauce, your unfair advantage, whatever you want to call it, so that you can continue to move without worrying about all the copycats. And if it's copycats, and just try to move faster than they can, because that's the only antidote, unless there's something that you can get a lock with, that kind of secret sauce, the proprietary technology or algorithm or relationships could be that too. But I think it's useful to get started, and kind of I would move towards an MVP before marketing, and then have that MVP inform that market research. Okay, we had these many assumptions. Okay, does it hold? Yes. Does it hold? Yes. Does it hold? Not this one. Okay, what do we need to do differently in order to do that? And then you build that as new functionality within this app. And this is obviously for a tech type of product. But if you were kind of building a product as well, or if you had a service that you were providing too, same thing. It's like, okay, I did this for my client and they liked 75% of it. This 25% they didn't really care for. Okay, do I continue to find a market for that 25 or not, right? Or do I focus on that 75, right? So I prefer action and responding to the market appropriately.
Awesome. Yeah. What are your thoughts on, let's say you have no tech background, right? But you're trying to make a tech platform, and you spend so much time trying to find a tech co-founder, but you just can't find one. And you've done all the market research, you see all the needs there, the demand, but you just can't find that person. Do you think it makes sense to just hire a company to build you that MVP, or do you think you should just keep waiting for that CTO to help you build it?
So, well, it depends on your particular circumstances, but again, I'm a fan of action more than anything. So if you're basically have truly searched anywhere and everywhere, because chances are they probably just sent a message to a bunch of people, hey, would you like to be my CTO? You're probably not like turning over every rock, not going to all the hackathons. You should be going to like all the coding boot camps, the Lighthouse Labs, the Brain Station and all that. Go to all of their demo days and find, oh, you're cool, and kind of shop your idea around. So if you're spending like an inordinate amount of time doing all that and still haven't found anybody, then you might want to think about, okay, am I pitching the idea correctly? Do people actually understand what I'm doing, right? And kind of turn inward to say, okay, am I communicating? Like, why don't people want to sign on and help me? And take that as feedback. In terms of like going out and buying services, freelancers, or an agency or whatever to help you, sure, if you have the means, right? So if you have a couple of $1,000 just sitting in the bank and you're willing to spend that on an MVP, you can definitely do that. Another option is for you to figure out how to code, right? Because coding is not that hard. It just takes a bunch of effort, right? And actually that goes a lot for folks that I've talked to. If that business guy takes some time to learn how to code, then the tech co-founder is like, wow, you built this? It's a piece of garbage, but at least you took the effort to do it. That shows some commitment on your part, and then more people are tend to be willing to help you out there, because it shows that it's not just, oh, I have this great idea and I'm hoping someone else will put in the hard work to do it. No, you put in some of the hard work yourself, and it'll get built anyway. So in those circumstances, if you have the means, sure, but just be clear on what you want built, right? Because the challenge of using one of those services is that you need to know exactly what screen it is, what happens when you click on this button, all the information you need to gather, not just I want it to look like this, right? Just create me like Airbnb, but change the room rentals to camping equipment. Well, that's not it, because it has tons of features and functionality that if they actually rebuilt it, it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in order to build that, right? Well, no, I don't want that. I want like a scaled down version. Okay, what about this? Okay, yeah, I don't need that function. What about this? Oh, I need that. You'll have to be very clear on what needs to be built. And in the meantime, go find that tech co-founder, because if you are now the head of a technology company, you better have, if not yourself, you're going to have a right hand that knows exactly what they're doing, right? So the quintessential entrepreneur like Steve Jobs, right? He doesn't know how to code. He doesn't know how to do like engineering, whatever. But he had Steve Wozniak. That basically that was his stuff, right? That was his domain, and he could do anything and everything. So they were kind of yin and yang of each other to help each other out. So he was able to find that. So I guess to answer your specific question is do all of it in the sense that still spend time going and finding that, because at some point, in order for your company to be successful, you will need a CTO, right? To have like outsourced to an agency, you're at their whims and demands, and then the price will probably keep going up and up and up and up, especially when you start getting successful, right? You could always learn to code, but if that's not the best use of your time, try to get it to the point where you can transition off, right? But yeah, at some point, I would really kind of double down on the efforts to find someone while trying to do this other stuff on the side, right? Because what would be great is if they can, if you had a team build it and you created an MVP, and the tech co-founder can see it, it's like, oh, that's what you meant. It's like, yeah, I can do that. Oh, I can do way better than this. And over a weekend, they can recode it and hack you something that's way better than what the team built, because now they understand what you're trying to do. So yeah, it depends on the circumstances, but I would definitely emphasize finding that tech co-founder. If you have the means, go ahead and build something at least to get started. And yeah, it may not hurt to learn to code yourself.
I feel like everyone should start learning how to code. It's such a valuable skill to have to do, right?
Yeah,
at least knowing the basics of how technology works.
For sure. I think in 2019, it's one of those things where it's almost like learning to read, right?
Yeah.
Everyone should know the basic concepts. Doesn't mean you have to be the most eloquent public speaker and reader out there, but at least you need to know like the phonetics, like what is a loop and if and all that sort of stuff, because a lot of that logical thinking will help in other parts of life as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Should integrate that into the curriculum. So
I actually heard like they're doing that in like some elementary schools actually.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are. Some of them are like aftercare programs and whatever. Some of them are integrated into them. So it all depends on the school, because I don't think it's mandated across all of them, but the ones that are a little bit more leading and forward thinking are aware that they need to put that in. Yeah.
So you mentioned like taking all this action, doing all this work, finding co-founders, doing some research. But what do you do like outside, since like how do you prevent not getting burnt out from having to work these long hours?
Well, I got kids, so they help me out. So a lot of it is setting your boundaries, right? So I've gone through my journey and try to be as productive as possible. And I wouldn't say I'm a slave to my calendar, but it dictates a lot of what I do. So I've used that as a productivity tool for me in order to be effective, where I color code my calendar. I put things like sleep in there, because I actually have an alarm that tells me to go to bed.
Oh, wow.
as crazy as that is, because I love what I'm doing so much that I would keep on doing it, right? So it's 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and I didn't go to bed. So I put a timer on that at about 10 something, it says start getting ready for bed, essentially. So that forces me to kind of wind down and kind of unplug, so that I can just maintain sleep, because sleep is very important. So it's setting those boundaries. And then I have on my calendar family time, where I know that certain appointments, if I'm doing an event or whatever, they might happen after hours, they might happen on the weekend. So I have to consciously know that I am now overriding this time with a very important client, my kids, my wife, and it's a give and take, right? And oftentimes what I will do is that if I'm taking an evening session, then I book a session where I'm going to pick up the kids early, and I'm going to take them out and hang with them a little bit, go to the park or whatever, right? So what was, do you remember what the question was? Something about
Burnout.
Oh, how do you
Yeah,
avoid
yeah, how do
burnout?
you prevent burnout?
So my recommendation to avoid burnout is to set your boundaries and understand your priorities. So I consciously make an effort to prioritize my family. So on my calendar, I have family time on the weekends, on evenings, and if I am booking an event in the evenings or on the weekend, then I have to consciously overwrite that time. And what I'll often do is take that time and move it forward. So one day I'll have an event. So last night I had an event from 7 to 9, right? But it was all the way in Mississauga, so I couldn't pick up the kids. So today I will try to get to the schools earlier, pick up the kids a bit earlier, and have my time, play with them, go to the park, play some Legos or whatever it is. Yeah, so setting those boundaries and figuring out, okay, I will only work 2 weekends a month, 2 weeknights a week, that sort of stuff. So I've had cases where unless the event is like so good I can't pass up, I will only be I will only miss dinner 2 nights out of the week, right? So if someone comes in and say, okay, I already have Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday booked, and someone wants to book me for Wednesday, I can't, and that might be turning down an opportunity, but I have my boundaries. So for the folks that are working on their app part time, then they have to set their own boundaries, right? Is it friends and family? Is it work? Is it school? Is it whatever it is? You have to figure out what your boundaries are, and actually truly recharge, because oftentimes we're at the mercy of the smartphone, the little notifications and stuff like that. So I make a conscious effort that when I'm with the kids, I'm with the kids. So the phone is in another room, so I can't even look at it. Because oftentimes, and what I found early on was it was a lot of quantity time, but not quality time. Because it'd be like, oh, Dad, can you play Lego with me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pew 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 pew, whatever, and then go be on my phone, right? And that's not a great way, because I would be spending an hour with them, but I wasn't really spending an hour with them, because I'd be responding to emails, I'd be checking messages, I'll be doing whatever. So making sure that whatever's priority for you is truly a priority, and experimenting a little bit, right? Because for me, yeah, I put that boundary of phone goes somewhere else, right? And being very cautious, and it's a challenge, because I'm like, in the back of my head, it's like, oh, there's probably a message waiting for me, or there's probably something I could do. But the more you can focus on that, you'll find that it helps with that burnout, because playing with my kids, it's recharging, it's fun, it's kind of interesting. So prioritizing the important stuff would be good, and even putting in the activities that do recharge you, because I have a colleague or a friend who basically manages calendar, but instead of on like different activities, it's based on his energy level. If he has something that drains him, like if he does a talk and a workshop, he will make sure that the next day or the next morning he basically turns basically energizing time. So stuff where he can recover and recuperate, right? So he knows that about himself, where he can put those differentiators. So whatever works for you, but actually taking the time, because it's really a marathon, not a sprint. And if you sprint too much, then you'll just pass out, right?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. To add on top of that, I think a lot of times new entrepreneurs, they'll just start working 10 hours as soon as they come up with the idea. And what that'll do is, you're not used to working 10-hour, 12-hour days, right? I think you should start off small, because if you're stressing so much time, you're going to burn out very quickly, because you're not used to it. You have to give up a lot of things very quickly. And I think that's something that's a mistake that they do. And I think really they should start off slow. And so that was just to add on top of that.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on the person because some people don't want to take it slow. Like they actually feel less productive if they're not doing a lot. But at the same time, they want to. You need to make sure you take some time for self care to make sure that you're okay. Because if working for 10 hours energizes you, that's great. But working for 10 hours a day for 365 may not energize you, right?
For sure.
So making sure that you put in those weekends, those breaks, those whatever, and maybe throughout the day, go take a walk or do something that kind of lifts your energy. But yeah, usually when you first start, you're in kind of that honeymoon phase. It's like, yeah, I want to do all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But after a couple of months, after a couple of years that you're doing it, it starts taking its toll, and you need to be able to recognize those signs and adjust accordingly. But but everyone's based on their own tendencies.
So when you're starting a startup, do you think it's something that you need to dedicate like your full time to? Like, can you have your startup and have another full-time job or like a part-time job, or like have a startup and be a student, like only work on your startup like a couple hours a week, meanwhile it's like gets up and running?
Yeah. Well, it all depends on the person's circumstances, right?
Yeah.
So oftentimes, the more you put in, the more you get out of it, right? But sometimes it's not about like working more; it's about working smarter. So it's not working harder; it's working smarter. But if you can do both, and work smarter and work more, then that's kind of the best of both worlds. But if you have to pay the bills, right, and you got rent and you got food and all that sort of stuff, you need to take do what you need to do. So working 9 to 5 is often what's needed. And one concept that I liked is to, if you are in that situation where you have bills and commitments and all that sort of stuff, treat your 9 to 5 as your investor, right? So your day job is your investor. They are paying you to do whatever it is at night to kind of build your dream. And that changes things a little bit. Like, well, if they're giving you money, you need to make sure that they're happy, right? So instead of going to work and kind of like, oh, I hate what I do and whatever, you want to say, okay, how do I make sure that my investor is happy and they keep continuing to give me money, right? Because essentially that's what it is. So if you take that mentality, it changes the dynamic a little bit, right? And a lot of folks will take action and do something. And the question is often, well, when do I flip? And oftentimes is if you're starting to make as much money or at least half as much money as you are in your day job, then that's the time to switch. Because if you think about it, you're working 8 hours here, you're working 8 hours here. So imagine you're making $50,000, and then on this after hours, you start making $25,000, right? Guess what's going to happen if you take that other 8 hours and spend 16 hours? Now you're making $50,000, right? That's kind of the idea. Now, chances are if you're spending 16 hours, you're going to make more than $50,000. But you'll probably want to at least get to the 50% mark before you kind of make that switch. At least for those people who are less risk averse. Some people it's like, oh, I made $1, let me just jump all into it. But oftentimes you want to get to at least 50%, and then you can actually see that because there's usually a bit of a hockey stick curve that gets up there. And the other challenge is sometimes if you're doing this and this is your hobby and you love doing it, sometimes it changes when you are paid to do it, when there are deadlines, when there's other people's expectations there, and the hobby is not as fun. So you just have to be aware of that sometimes that thing you do on the side might not ever be more than a part-time thing where you make some pocket money and extra change, because if you turn it into a full-time thing, it's not going to be as enjoyable as that. So just being aware of that state as well. So you don't always have to turn it, because people can live comfortably and happily with someone kind of as their investor, but still having that other stuff that they love on the side, right?
No, wow, that's awesome. And just to bring it back a bit, for those entrepreneurs who are really scared about sharing their idea because someone might steal it, or they have an idea and then they search up if there's any competitors. Sorry, they search up if there's any competitors and they go, oh no, there's already a lot of people doing it. You know what? This idea is no good. Should they be worried about those things, or?
Well, oftentimes it's there's definitely something to be said about first mover advantage, the first person who can do that. But oftentimes it's less about being first and more about being best, right? Whoever's the best in the market tends to win. Now, being first, you get more of the market share. People know about you and all that sort of stuff. And usually, when you're on a platform, you don't switch, or using a product or service, it's harder to get them to switch, unless the better part of it is compelling enough for them to want to switch. So the one example is Uber, which everyone knows, and it's kind of the um, um, ride app out there. But there were iterations of it before. So Magic Cab apparently was one that existed, but their layout wasn't as great, not as user friendly, and all that sort of stuff. So they were first, but Uber just did it better. Maybe it made it more convenient. There were more drivers, more riders. Because if you go on an app and there's never a cab around, it's not going to be a great experience. So why would I go back? So there's always a balance between kind of getting out there and turning into something that's usable and viable for the person, and versus just getting it out there, testing the market, because unless it's out in the market in the real person's hands, you'll never get real feedback, because all the research that you have is just speculation based on assumptions and things like that. And if you can get them to be interested and say, oh, I wish the app would do that, well, incorporate that to the next enhancement or the next release or whatever, because you're doing it based on real wide feedback. But be careful with that, because there's always there's an expression, well, Henry Ford once said, who created the car, said that if I asked my customers what they'd want a faster horse, right? But instead he created a car, right? So just being aware that you need to listen to your customers, and figure out, okay, how does that impact what you want to do, not necessarily do exactly what they say, right? So I'd encourage folks that not just being first and doing it fast, but also doing it so that they're adding value, they're the best at what they do, because generally best kind of wins out at the end, right?
It's completely true. And also people that come after can like learn from the mistakes that first people did.
100%.
See what works, see what didn't.
Yeah.
And then they're just the first always have to try and innovate, and then the second people are just moving a lot faster.
Yeah, because they can take a look at like all the complaints that are happening and say, okay, I can fix that in my release before this other company, because the company at the front will have to reverse engineer or re-architect stuff in order to incorporate that, whereas they're building it with the purpose of whatever functionality to address the complaints that the user are having, right? So yeah, it's there is an advantage to be first mover, but not necessarily as much as people think. So if you can, if there's already something in the market and you can say, I could do it better, then do it better. But there's a difference between doing it like incrementally better and saying you can do it 10% better versus I can 2x or 10x it better. Because and if you can do that, then it's an innovation, it's a disruption, it's doing it differently than what's out there. So yeah, don't be afraid if it's already there. And sometimes it's there's room in the market for more than one, right? Oftentimes companies, governments don't like monopolies, right? They want 2 or 3 players there, and people, generally speaking, they want choice, right? So even if there is the dominant player, there's always a second tier, like a niche player where people will like that. I mean, when you have Coke, there's still Pepsi is always there, right? Depending on which you put, Apple and Android, they'll always be there. Because some people will just not want to be part of the majority. So there'll always be a market for the non-majority, but you have to be the best as kind of the second tier there too. So just being aware of the first mover advantage is not always what it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, for sure. And also to add on top of that, sometimes the competitors are focusing a specific target market.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, Mercedes, BMW, they're targeting the more higher class people with their more expensive cars, more luxurious cars.
Mm-hmm.
But then, people like Honda and Toyota, they're focusing the people those consumers who just want to get from point A to point B, a really economic and cheap car, right? So sometimes, even though there are competitors in the space, they may not be necessarily targeting everyone, and there might be a need for your idea to target a certain demographic, a certain target market.
Yeah, and you'll have to be careful if your demographic is kind of the cheap, the lower end tier, because when you're there, it's always a race to the bottom. It's who can do it cheaper, because if you did it for 10,000, someone will figure out how to do it for 9,000. for 8,000 for 7, and it'll be race to the bottom, right? Where I think your example of Honda and Toyota are a little bit different, is that they go for quality and they go for value. Because you buy a Honda, you know it's going to be on the road for 20 years, right? So they're actually not cheap if you actually look at the relative cost, but over 20 years, you'll save a lot more than buying one of their competitors, right? Which may be, from an absolute perspective, cheaper, but they probably won't be on the road for as long, right? So keeping in mind, a lot of folks that tend to be more successful are the ones that provide a certain level of value, a certain level of being premium, right? So not necessarily the cheapest, but they know, okay, I know that with this product, I will get a certain level of quality, right? Because I am the best at this particular area. So yeah, but if you can niche it down and get basically your 1,000 true fans, as I think it was Seth Godin who mentioned it, but one of those authors, if you can have one of those, then they're always the ones who are like first in line to sign up for the thing, the first one to say yes, and or to upgrade to whatever it is. And if you can get a bunch of those, it's better to get 1,000 true fans out of like a market size of 1 billion people than like 0.00001% of that billion, right? Because those people will be kind of the ones that follow you around. They will tell all of their friends, and hopefully be, the concept is a social sneezer, right? Where like a virus, you sneeze on people and they get infected, right? Because when you love this product so much, then your friends can't help but to like it too, assuming that you have a good relationship. And but they'll be like, oh yeah, okay, if Tony loves it, I love it too, right? If you have a good relationship with them. And yeah, if you can find those influencers amongst folks, then you'll have a better market than if you just go randomly, the 0.0001% of a large population. It's probably not as great.
Yeah, and since we're talking about like quality of cars and whatnot, I wanted to, dive into quality of software development companies.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think there's such a stigma of offshore companies like India, China? Why is it that people are so hesitant to hire these, developers?
Well, a lot of it usually comes from someone's experience. Like someone heard from somewhere of an offshore office company that they work for, that kind of did something that wasn't expected in there. So the challenge is in a lot of those countries, the education system is a lot of like, do as you're told. This is exactly what you want to do, which is great if you know exactly what you want. But not so great when you need people to think a little bit more broadly about it. So when I was working, I remember a context where there was a offshore development team that we were doing, and I can't remember the context of the development we were doing, but there's specifically a time where there's a screen, and I wanted, every time you click on this button, I put in the spec that it's going to take some values, and then 10 would appear here. So we got it back, push the button, 10 appears. It's like, okay, change the number, push the button, 10 appears. I'm like, huh? What the heck happened? So we look at the code, because I have a tech background, and I looked at it, and it basically said, if you click the button, then a 10 appeared. I'm like, oh, well, that's not exactly what I wanted, but that's what I asked for.
Yeah.
Right? So I can't necessarily fault them. It was like, well, actually, what I want to happen was this. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you should have told us that. And they fixed it relatively quickly. And sometimes people make quick changes, like, oh yeah, quick change, I'll have it done. But what they haven't thought about is the downstream impact and dependencies, where if you change this, then you got to change this. So you change this one thing and it breaks everything else, right? So it tends to be that in the North American context, people ask, well, why? Why are you making this change? What are the impacts and all that? So it's less about just being an order taker and doing it. It's thinking about, well, what are the broader impacts? So there is a stigma associated now. It is getting better, because those countries realize that, but it's kind of hard to change the culture and the thinking. So just be aware that if you're working with those types of companies, know exactly what you want, everything, and don't take for granted, oh, I thought it would already do this, right? Because you might say, okay, I want a login, right? Okay, perfect. They register by email. If you don't specify that you want like password recovery, they might not build it in, because you never asked for it. They can log in, perfect, but you can't recover your password because you didn't ask for it, right? So just being aware of that. So the stigma comes because people have those experiences. Now, like I said, they're working to improve it, and hopefully the North American system will still continue on that and not kind of remediate back to that standard, right? So, but yeah, so there is an edge for folks with Canadian, with North American developers, and some European ones are actually gaining some notoriety as well. Oh,
God bless you.
Sorry. Yeah, it reminds me of that example you just gave with Toyota and Honda,
Mhm.
where they might not be the cheapest, but they are the cheapest in the long run.
Yeah.
Because like it will have that much more value if you hire like onshore, like North American or European companies.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the companies out of India and China are a lot cheaper, but if it breaks in a year,
Right.
then it ends up being a lot more expensive.
Yep. Yeah, and there's a lot of aspects of that where I actually just listened to a podcast and it was a book was featured. It's called Future Crimes, that basically talks about cybersecurity, of which a lot of companies it's an afterthought. They just need to get their app, they need to ship it, they need to get their app out. But meanwhile, there's all these potential security vulnerabilities that are not addressed, right? Yeah. So a lot of the recent hacks to different companies where they all their bank account, their credit card information, or whatever. It often comes through like the silliest little things if you actually dig down to it. So people are more thinking about, okay, what's the cost of the development and re-engineering and all these fixing all these technical loopholes or whatever, versus the fallout of you got hacked and there's a million user credit cards that got hacked, and what is the PR campaign that has to do all the lawsuits that come after you. How much is that going to cost versus re-architecting the system? So I mean, that's on the security side, but that could be with any aspect of the code as well, right? So sometimes when you pay for the cheaper solution, you get what you pay for, right? So just being aware of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's an amazing quote that really sums it up, which is if you think it's expensive hiring a professional, wait until you hire an amateur. Right?
Yeah.
Because you're gonna have to recode everything yourself. You gotta scrap that, right? And Andres, being the previous CTO and co-founder of Flipped, I know you had some experience there too. Do you want to share some of the experience?
So I hired a team out of India to develop our dashboard for professors, and like it was just a mess when we got it back. Like it kind of worked just like yours worked. The specifications were like kind of there. Press the buttons, things worked, but there were so many things that weren't accounted for. Like the time zones weren't accounted for, right? So if you used it in somewhere that wasn't like the exact time zone as they were coding it, it just the times were completely unsynced, and like everything was like hard coded. So like there was no extendability. We tried to extend it and it was like impossible. I remember we just had to like end up scrapping the whole project and recode it from scratch.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern.
Yeah. So we're running out of time here. Thank you so much, Luki, for coming on to the show. But
thanks for
is there any last tips or tricks you want to share with the folks out there?
So if the audience are entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call them, oftentimes it's just taking action, right? Take that first step, go and kind of share that idea with someone, see what they think, go learn to code, go build that whatever, go find a supplier, whatever it is, take action. Because the other part is if you're truly an entrepreneur and want to be there, and you go through your life and not do it, then when you look back when you're 100 and look at your life and said, oh, I had this opportunity to do this, and I did it and I failed, right? That's one story versus I had this opportunity to do it and I never even tried. That's going to eat at you a lot more than trying and not having it done. And there's a big stigma of kind of failure in society, but oftentimes, well, I have a quote that I love that I live by. I never lose, I either win or I learn. So I can honestly say to all you folks that in my life I have never failed, but I've just learned a lot, right? So I encourage folks to take those lessons and learn from them and figure out, okay, why was it that it didn't meet my expectation, right? Or what didn't I know? Now, if you do it again, well, then you fail, right? Because you're repeating the same thing over again. But understanding, okay, you didn't have some information, well, just try it out, and enjoy the journey, and just be careful of kind of all the glitz and glamour out there right now, because entrepreneurship is very hot, but it comes at costs. Sometimes your time, sometimes your energy, and just being aware that some people shouldn't be entrepreneurs. Actually, once in a while, I think, you know what, I should just go get my old job back, because it would be so much easier and nicer, right? And then I just figure out, okay, well, if I do that, then who's gonna be on this mission that to help elevate kind of human consciousness and education and all that, right? So give it a shot and put your idea into action.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Luki, again for coming onto the show.
Thank you.
And he is the author of Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier. So if you haven't checked out that book yet, please go and check it out.
Cool. Thank you.
That's it.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Luki.
Perfect. Thank you.